Ghana has a reputation of being a city of friendly, welcoming people who love to help each other and embrace the presence of strangers. In Ghana, particularly in its two biggest cities, that is the capital Accra and Kumasi, women freely move about, whether it's late at night or during the day. The country has a reputation for being one of the safest in the whole of Africa. However, in the mid to late 1990s, a dark shadow fell over its streets, one which caused fear and panic among its helpless citizens. Between 1993 and 2000, the police kept finding a chilling and disturbing occurrence. Dozens of young women had been strangled to death both in Accra and in Kumasi. In total, police found 34 victims, all killed in the same way. They appear to have been then strangled to death, often with articles of their clothes missing. Their bodies were then dumped in bushes and alleyways across the capital region. At the scene of many of the murders, many strange things were found. Unused condoms and syringes were scattered around the bodies. Some of the women even had their genitals mutilated, and some had pinpricks where it seemed their blood had been drawn from them. This led many people to believe that these killings were the work of a ritualist or a group of ritualists who committed these crimes for sacrificial purposes. Many of these women were either women who sold food late at night in the city or sex workers who roamed the streets at night searching for people to patronize their services. Understandably, these killings sent a panic throughout the whole nation. These killings seemed to target only women, so women's advocacy groups took to the streets demanding answers from the authorities. One person was quoted by the Daily Graphic as saying, "We are living in fear. Every day we hear about another woman killed. We just want the police to catch him." Clearly, the police had work to do to identify the killer behind these disturbing crimes, so they decided to get some help from the best of the best. Even though these killings began in 1993, it wasn't until 8 years later, in 2001, that the police began to investigate. Initially, police treated the cases of women being strangled and killed as individual isolated cases. But the citizens of Mataheko, a suburb near Dansoman in Accra, refused to follow this narrative. The people of Mataheko were convinced that these murders were all linked, either to ritual killings ahead of the December 2000 elections, or even scarier, a serial killer. This sparked a huge protest on the streets of Mataheko on 22nd December 2000. The aim of this protest was to put pressure on the then Interior Minister Ni Okaija Adamafio and the Inspector General of Police, the late Peter Nanfuri. The then wife of the president, late Jerry John Rawlings, even joined in these protests, showing the level of public outcry to stop these murders. The message was clear: either solve the murders or resign from your post. In January 2001, Ghana got a new president, John Agyekum Kufuor. Soon, he realized that the police service of Ghana didn't have the required training to solve serial killings and serial murders. So in May of that year, following huge public pressure, he decided to get help from the Federal Bureau of Investigations, that is the FBI. FBI Director Louis Free was visiting Ghana at the time, and President Kufuor asked him to send specialists to train the police officers in Ghana to help stop these serial killings. Within 10 days, 7 FBI agents from the Serial Killers Unit, Forensics, and a polygraph team arrived to train the Ghana Police Service. Investigator Jerry Downs and others from the Child Abduction/Serial Killer Unit at Quantico, a polygrapher from Atlanta, and the Washington Field Office headed to Ghana to assist to stop this murder. One of the techniques the FBI taught the Ghana Police Service is something called systematic neighborhood canvassing. This is a system of investigations where the police officers go from door to door in the neighborhood where the murder happened and ask people if there's anything or anyone they found suspicious or who they thought could commit a crime like this. When the police in Ghana did this, initially it led to the arrest of a carpenter's apprentice named Eje Kwejo, who was suspected to know something about the murder of a woman named Joyce Boateng, and this is a story we will give more details on very soon. After interrogation, one name which had come up previously was brought up again, and police finally had a solid person of interest, a driver and a mechanic in Adenta known as Charles Papa Kwabna Ebo Kwanzaa. In 1968, in Komenda, a suburb of the central region of Ghana, a man was born, and no one could have anticipated the amount of pain and terror he was going to bring to so many women and families during his lifetime. Not much is known about Charles Kwanzaa. He never mentioned any family or close ties during all his interrogations. Investigators and neighbors mentioned that he grew up in a broken home with a tumultuous home life, which may have contributed to his fractured mind and the lack of empathy he showed toward his victims. He never got married, and he never had any children, and he frequently moved from place to place during his life after he dropped out of basic schooling at an early age. This was a man with no ties to anything on this earth and a lack of empathy for anyone outside himself. We could call this the perfect recipe for a deranged and twisted serial killer. Before committing the crimes he was accused of, Charles Kwanzaa had already gotten into trouble with the law numerous times before that. His crime spree started in 1986 when Kwanzaa was just 18 years old. He assaulted and raped a young woman in Dansoman, which led to him being sentenced to 9 months in jail, which he served at the James Fort prison in Accra. Kwanzaa obviously didn't learn his lesson in prison, and it seems that this stint in jail rather made his uncontrollable lust take a further hold of him. Just the next year, in 1987, he committed the same crime again, and this time he was sentenced to 3 years in jail, which he served at the Nsawam prisons. Upon his release in 1990, it would seem to many people that Kwanzaa was reformed because he was not arrested again until 1996 for committing a robbery, after which he moved to Dansoman in Accra. However, knowing that his killing spree started in 1993, it is clear that he just got better at hiding his uncontrollable lust and murderous anger. Charles Kwanzaa wasn't arrested for his crimes until 2001, but we know that his crime spree began in 1993 after he assaulted and strangled an unidentified sex worker to death. However, just a few months before he got arrested for robbery in 1996, he actually committed a crime which was far worse than what he was arrested for, which the police had no idea about. Ekuyasewa was a hairdresser who had been out on the evening of January 19, 1996 to visit a restaurant which was owned by her boyfriend around the Kumasi Sports Stadium. In the early evening of January 20th, a watchman at the stadium went out to inspect a newly built kiosk near the stadium. There he found Sewa's body lying in a bush, and he quickly reported it to the police. The woman was soon identified by her sister, and it was confirmed that she was assaulted and strangled to death. The sad thing is, Kwanzaa was actually arrested during the investigations of the murder of Ekuyasewa because people had apparently seen him around her, but he vehemently denied that he knew her. Unfortunately, due to a lack of physical evidence to tie him to the crime, Kwanzaa was set free. He was free to carry on with his slew of rapes and murders, which had become an enjoyable and disturbing pastime for him. At the turn of the 21st century, with 7 years of numerous rapes and murders in his portfolio, Charles Kwanzaa had become extremely confident in his ability to evade arrest. This was what led him to commit 2 more murders, one in July of 2000 and the other in December of 2000. These 2 murders are what finally led to his arrest and imprisonment. In 2001, when the police began their hunt for a serial killer, the government promised a reward of 50 million old Ghana cedis, that is $8,500 in today's money, to whoever could provide information that led to the arrest of the killer. With this substantial reward as motivation, 2 men, that is Al-Hassan Mohammed Tina and C.K. Jumo, decided to bring the killer to justice themselves. An apprentice who worked for Jumo the carpenter had confessed to his master that recently his girlfriend had been found dead at the civil aviation quarters in Medina, and he didn't know what he had to do. Jumo, obviously disturbed by this, encouraged his apprentice to report the matter to the Medina Police Department for them to investigate. When this was done, unfortunately the apprentice was arrested as the prime suspect in the murder. The apprentice being spoken about here was a man called Ejekwejo, who we spoke of earlier, and he had to find a way to prove that he didn't commit the murder, else he could spend the rest of his life in jail for the murder of his girlfriend, a woman named Joyce Boateng. While being interrogated by police, Eje Kojo told them that his girlfriend informed him the previous day that she was going out with a mystery man to search for accommodation in the Medina area. After more pressure from the police during interrogation, he gave a description of a man who she told him about. He was said to be a hairy man of average height who drove a Kia truck, and by the story which was being told, he was the last person to see Joyce Boateng alive. The police then gave Eje Kojo's master a task to produce this so-called hairy mystery man, or their friend would be charged with the murder of Joyce Boateng. Motivated by this ultimatum from the police, CK Jumo and his friend Al-Hassan Mohammed Tina rallied up some boys in the area to go and find this mysterious Kia truck driver, but initially they had no luck in finding him. Unfortunately, the boys which they had rallied were scared at the potential of confronting someone who was accused of being a murderer. After asking around the area of Adenta, they finally zeroed in on the house of a man who fit the description which they had been given. So they decided to set up surveillance on the house to see if they could get him and bring him to justice. The first 2 days of their surveillance produced no results, unfortunately, so Mohammed Tina actually went home. But on the third day, around 5 a.m., Jumo, who had stayed and kept surveillance, called Tina and told him that he had spotted a man who fit the description that they were given and that he was at the house. Unbeknownst to these two men, they were about to encounter the man responsible for taking the life of over 30 women in just 7 years, including Joyce Boateng. This is how Mohammed Tina narrated the day of Kwanzaa's arrest in an interview with Modern Ghana. He said, "I jumped out of bed and drove to the Medina police station to inform the police of our findings. I was then provided with a police escort and we went towards the house. I kept in touch with Jumo the whole time by phone until we got there. It was like a Hollywood scene." He then narrated what happened when they got to Kwanzaa's house at Adenta. The whole scene was conducted smoothly, almost as if it was rehearsed. When we got to the house, he was about to go and pick pawpaw from a farm to the port for export. The police asked him if he knew Joyce Boateng, and he replied in Fante that he didn't know who she was. Kwanzaa was then bundled into Al-Hassan Tina's car with some police officers, while his mate was taken together with his Kia truck all to the police station. Initially, Kwanzaa was adamant that he had no idea who this Joyce Boateng was, but after being pressed by police, he eventually confessed that he did indeed know her. He claimed that she was just a seamstress who fixed a torn shirt for him, which he paid for, and that he didn't know anything about her outside that. When they got to the police station, the case was booked and forwarded to the police headquarters. Kwanzaa was then placed in the same cell as Eje Kojo, who he didn't know, and this led to him making another fatal mistake. Now, standing face to face with the man who raped and murdered his girlfriend, Kwanzaa told Kojo that his plan was to remain silent and deny knowing anything about the murder of Joyce Boateng. And him, thinking that Eje Kojo was also a suspect in this case, he also encouraged him to do the same. When Kojo told the police about this raised huge suspicions because it seemed like this was something Charles Kwanzaa was very used to doing. This led to even further investigations into his past, and what they found was horrible and disturbing, to say the least. Eventually, police were able to gather information on the movements of Charles Kwanzaa. He had moved from Komenda to Kumasi, where he committed his first confirmed murder in 1996 before he moved to Accra. He then lived in Mataheko, Adenta, and notably Dansoman, where he committed the vast majority of his murders. At this point, the police had a solid logical trail, but they needed a confession to secure a conviction, so they brought in a polygraph expert from the FBI to test out his story. As expected, Charles Kwanzaa failed the polygraph test, and after 2 days of grueling interrogations, he was finally ready to talk. The police were able to extract 9 confessions from Kwanzaa, but they believe he was responsible for many more murders. The total number of his victims is believed to be in the mid-30s, but according to speculation, it could be as high as 90 different victims. The last of Charles Kwanzaa's murders was committed in December of 2000. On 10 December 2000, Millicent Maunia Adeku met Kwanzaa at her relative's bar. Kwanzaa proposed to her a sexual encounter, but Adeku said no, and she said that she was married. She was not seen alive after leaving the bar. Adeku was found murdered behind the house on December 11th, strangled and posed sexually. Her t-shirt was missing, and this became a huge piece of evidence for the police to use in the case. This missing t-shirt was later found in Charles Kwanzaa's home when authorities raided and searched his place. The shirt had blood stains on it, which linked DNA evidence directly to Charles Kwanzaa. Finally, the police had the confessions they needed and the physical evidence they needed. The monster they wanted to take down was finally done for. When he was questioned, Charles Kwanzaa allegedly claimed that she had insulted him at the bar and he became possessed by an evil spirit and then killed her. This is a similar story he stuck to for all the 9 murders he confessed to, blaming evil spirits and uncontrollable anger to the reason he took the lives of this innocent woman. Charles Kwanzaa's trial for the serial killings began on Thursday, 11 July 2002 at the High Court Criminal Sessions in Accra. He was subsequently convicted of the strangulation deaths of 9 women and sentenced to be hanged until he died. However, Charles Kwanzaa has been on death row since 2002, being incarcerated at the Nsawam prisons in Accra, awaiting his inevitable death. At this point, it may seem like this is an open and shut case. Evidence and confessions link Charles Kwanzaa to 9 murders and he was in jail. Unfortunately, the story did not end there. In 2003, Charles Kwanzaa spoke to the press and he denied committing any of the murders he was accused of. He claimed the so-called confessions to the crimes were extracted from him under duress, claiming he was tortured and abused by the police, forcing him to confess to the killings. However, while in jail, it is noted that Charles Kwanzaa was seen bragging to fellow inmates that he actually killed and over 90 women during his lifetime. While police disregarded these statements as meaningless bragging, the truth remains that Charles Kwanzaa confessed to killing only 9 women. As of today, 25 of the 34 murders that happened remain unsolved. This has led to many conspiracy theories over the years about what really happened. Some people speculate that Charles Kwanzaa could not possibly have been working alone without getting caught and believe that other killers might be out there. Others believe that these murders were ritualistic in nature, especially leading up to the December 2000 general elections of Ghana. Regardless of this, the truth is that Charles Kwanzaa was a deeply disturbed and violent man. If it wasn't for the efforts of the police, the FBI, and of course Al-Hassan Mohammed Tina, C.K. Jumo, and Ejay Kwejo, this evil man would likely never have been caught, and who knows how many more victims and how many more women he would have abused and killed. My heart goes out to all the victims and their families. If you enjoyed this story of one of the darkest and most disturbing men in Ghana's history, hit that subscribe button to be notified when I post more. I plan to make more videos on niche historical topics like this, so look out for that moving forward. Anyways, that's about it for today. Stay safe out there.